Hey, so let's get started, right? Let me introduce you to Google Tag Manager. And so this video, this session is all about me, getting you up to speed with Google Tag Manager and how to use it for tracking a few basic things. So if you're a no, if you don't actually come from the tech background but still want to be able to take control of the data flowing into marketing tools and various other tools, you're gonna love this video, right? Okay, so what exactly is Google Tag Manager? It's a completely 100% free tool by Google that basically allows you to manage and deploy a lot of your marketing tags or snippets on your website or mobile app without actually inserting direct code into your website or app, right? And a couple of major benefits of using Google Tag Manager are that one, there's no tech dependency, so you actually don't need to wait on your developer to add tags or add code for the data that you need, right? Another thing is you can actually have everything at one place, right? So all of your tags, all of your code, all of your data is actually just being managed from one place, and so it's easier to understand things, it's easier to debug, etc. Now, some of the most common use cases that can actually be super helpful for you is, say you have a website and you want to track when someone clicks on some button, and you actually don't want to go to your developer because they're going to take a hell lot of time of to add that code and all of that. You can actually just do that via Google Tag Manager and set it up yourself, right? And that's just one example, right? So a lot of other examples, like you want to set up conversion tracking for Google Ads or Meta, you want to pass a lot of other custom data, you want to install analytics tools, do any of that stuff, you can do it using Google Tag Manager. Okay, cool. So now let's get into how do we actually use Google Tag Manager. I think that's the part that you guys must be most excited about. So Google Tag Manager is mainly made up of three major things. So you have tags, you have triggers, and you have variables, right? Now, what are tags? Tags are basically snippets of code that send data to a third party, right? So for example, a Mixpanel tag would be that you want to send an event when a user clicks on a sign up button. Now, triggers are essentially that define when should a tag fire, right? So what's the trigger for the tag to fire? So if I'm sending data to Mixpanel, when someone clicks on a sign up button, I'll be like, okay, when this gets triggered, that's when you're supposed to send this data to Mixpanel. Okay, what are variables? So variables are, I think it's very self-explanatory, but they are supposed to store values that you can then actually use in tags and triggers. So it's more or less more of a dynamic sort of setup, right? And there are two kinds of variables, right? So the first kind of variable is a built-in variable, which is, so Google's already come up with a lot of built-in variables that you can directly use. And then there are custom variables, which is you might want to set up a lot of custom variables that your developer is sending, say from the tech end, and you might just want to use it, right? Now, built-in variables, just a quick note on that, they're super useful, right? So for example, if you want to create a trigger for when someone lands on a specific page, you actually have a built-in variable of page URL, right? So you can have a condition that, okay, when page URL contains XYZ, that's when this this tag should trigger, right? Now, by the way, just to be clear, I'm just taking you guys through the theory of it, and then I'll work with you to actually do like a real quick live example of how to actually use Google Tag Manager and what are some of the things you can do, right? Okay, now one of the most important things in Google Tag Manager is the data layer, right? So now data layer is nothing but a JavaScript object, and that Google Tag Manager uses to store and pass information from your website to Google Tag Manager, or from your mobile app to Google Tag Manager, right? And the way it works is, so you can actually have developers push some information to the data layer, and then Google Tag Manager will read it, and you can utilize it in terms of variables or however you want to actually fire additional data to the third party tool. So it's actually very similar to how you would fire an event to, say, an analytics platform, right? very similar to that, you can push data to a data layer, and then that data can actually be used and manipulated in different ways to actually send it to the actual tool where you want it to go, right? So for example, here an example is you might want to push a purchase event with a few properties, right? And now how do you actually retrieve data via variables? Simple, just go to variables, create a new data layer variable, so you can choose, and I'll show that to you in a bit. You can name it, and then you need to give what is the data layer variable name. Now this is important. If this does not match, then in that case it's not going to work properly. Okay, now in terms of triggers, there are actually multiple types of triggers, and a really smart way of trying to understand what trigger to use, so that's using developer tools, right? So I'll talk about that a bit. So some of the most common trigger types are page views, when someone clicks on a button or something, when someone submits a form, scroll depth, with someone scroll till 25% and you want to fire something. You want to fire some custom event, based on some custom triggers that you want to define. There's a lot of other triggers like timer. If someone spent X seconds on the website, you might want to fire. If someone clicks on a link, you might want to fire, right? We'll take a look at all of that in a bit. Okay. So how to find element selectors? Now I'll talk about this in a bit when I'm showing in the live practical, because that's where you'll understand this better. And then I think the last part is just previewing and debugging Google Tag Manager, and that's where Google Tag Manager is also super powerful, because it really you can really go into depth and check what's working and what's not working. Okay, cool. So let's get into it, right? So this is Google Tag Manager, right? You can create an account, add your website. So right now I'm actually showing you for a web product. That's where most Google Tag Managers are used, or setups are used, because doing it on mobile can get a bit tricky. So I'll cover web for now, right? Okay, so like we said, we have tags, triggers, and variables here, right? So now what I'm gonna do is I'll go to a tag, and our use case is we're gonna install Mixpanel for my website. So this is my website, right? We're gonna install Mixpanel for my website, and we are gonna fire an event when someone clicks on Let's Talk. Now I've already done it, but I'm going to walk you through the exact steps on how you are supposed to do it, right? Okay, great. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll have to initialize or install Mixpanel, right? So how do we do that? I'm going to click on new, because I want to add a tag, and this is what I see, right? Now I click on tag configuration, and it tells me a few things that I can choose from, right? So Google Analytics, Google Ads. So a lot of these things are basically, you can actually use Google Analytics or Google Ads. These are basically predefined tags that Google's already built for you. So for example, if I just do Google Analytics, and I can be like, I want to fire GA4 event, it gives me all of the things that I can add here, that what's the measurement ID, what's the event name, what are the parameters, etc., right? Now this is usually useful because because Google Tag Manager is also focused towards non-tech people. They don't actually expect you to write code of say analytics.track and then the event name and properties, right? Because that's usually what the coders would do, or the tech guys would do, right? But one of my favorite things to do this is not to use these preset templates, is because sometimes they can get limited in terms of what you want to do, because you might want to go like really in depth into a few things, right? Even while sending data, you might want to calculate properties dynamically based on what the user is clicking on and all of that. So what I usually use is custom HTML, right, where you can actually write HTML or JavaScript essentially, right? So let's talk about this, right? So I've already created this. So I've used custom HTML. I've added my Mixpanel initialized code. So this is all JavaScript. This is exactly what your developer would add on the website if you were not using Google Tag Manager, right? But you can just add it here. All of this is something you get from Mixpanel, so I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is actually set a trigger. So what I have done is I've said that, okay, you know what, this tag or this code should actually fire on all of the pages, right? And So what I'm gonna do is I'll just show you. So when you click on this, you can either choose a trigger so that you might have already saved, or you can add a new trigger, right? And when I go to triggers, so now these are the kind of triggers that you can add that we just spoke about, right? So which is page view, window loaded, when someone clicks a button, when someone clicks a link, form summation, scroll depth. You wanna do when there's a timer. You can choose any of these, right? Now what have I done? Let me actually just show you. So we'll go to the triggers tab. Okay, and what I've done is I've said clicks just links, because what this does, it actually is a link click which takes me to my calendar, right? So I have chosen click just links, right? And I've said that, okay, you know what, it should only fire on some link clicks where click classes is equal to this, right? Okay. Now this is where things get interesting, right? I'm sure you're confused on what exactly a click class is and all of that. So now whenever a website is built, right, there are some IDs with every button, there's some classes for every button and every content in the website, right? So that's also what you'll see is what I didn't cover here, but you'll see click classes, click ID, click text. Now how do you identify that? It's not complicated, super simple. So you go to the website, right? You right click, you click on inspect, right? You click on this button here and you click on whatever you want to track, right? So I'm gonna click here. Okay, actually let me click on this, right? Now so what happens is in the elements tab this gets highlighted, right? So this is the entire element or code for the front end code for this button. Now here do you see class, right? Now this is actually the click class, right? So this is the value for this button, and I can be like, okay, when someone clicks on this, fire an event, right? I can also use a multiple other things wherein I could be like, oh, you know what, if the link goes to this, which is href, if it goes to this, then fire this event, right? So and so this is click class. In a lot of places what you'll also see is just ID, right? So if you're just seeing ID, that's actually class ID. So there's click classes, there's click ID, there's click text, right? Whatever you want to use. So if you see class, that's click class. If you see ID, that's ID. And usually I think, in my experience, this has been the most common way of identifying button clicks. So it's either click class, click ID, or using, if it's redirecting to some link, you could probably use that, right? Okay, so now what I've done is I've actually just used this. I've gone to Google and I've copy pasted it here, right? That's essentially what I've done, and I've tagged it this to another tag. So I created another tag which is let's talk click, right? I've added custom HTML where I've added Mixpanel dot track let's talk click, and it's tagged to this specific trigger. Okay. Now I've done this, right? Now before we actually get into previewing and publishing, let's take a look at variables, right? Just a quick look. These are a few built-in variables you can configure and add a lot more, right? So these are all variables that Google gives you out of the blue, and then you can actually come up with user-defined variables where you could be like, okay, what type of variable do I want to add? So we just spoke about data layer variable, right? So what's the name that's where you're going to add. You can actually choose a different variable, which is okay, if it's a URL, is it a custom JavaScript, if it's a JavaScript variable, so on and so forth. Now these things are slightly more complicated, so I'm not going to cover these right now. I'm going to keep it super basic, right? Okay, cool. So let's get into it. So now I'll just show you how you can actually verify if it's working or it's not working. And what I'll also show you is, so right now what you had to do is you actually had to go here, click on the button and see what is the class that's firing, right? Now there's another way that is more robust for you to do it, is that, so Google Tag Manager, while you're in the preview mode, it also shows you what is the click class and all of that when you click on something, right? And you can actually get the values from there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on preview. Okay, so this is going to open up. I'll enter my website URL which is connected here, and this is going to open up. Okay, so now it's, if you can see, it's opened up with GTM debug, and I have like a tag assistant screen that's opened up. Now the first thing that you see is you already see a Mixpanel initialization tag that has fired, right? Because I've configured it to fire on every page view, but I see that let's talk click still hasn't fired. So now let's actually try clicking on this, right? Now do you see let's talk click has also fired? And now here is where you see what all is actually happening with the website, right? So there was consent initialization, then initialization, container loaded, DOM ready, window loaded, link click, right? Now when there was a link click, that's when this fired because it recognized the specific link. Okay, now the really interesting part here is when I go to variables, it actually tells me the click class, right? Now this will happen irrespective of if you have a tag or trigger and all of that, right? So eventually if you're not able to find a very accurate thing here, what you can do is just preview it, come here, do that action and see what variables you have, and then just use one of those variables, right? So you have click classes here, it tells you the value, and then you can just use this value, right? Okay, so this is super simple on how you can use Google Tag Manager to fire a lot of your events, right? Just for full disclosure, the way I learned Google Tag Manager was purely through ChatGPT, right? So I was not too familiar with ChatGPT, but once I started working with it, asked a lot of questions, got a lot of code written, and that's also how I would recommend you guys to probably go ahead with it and get started, because there's no shame in doing that, right? Use ChatGPT if you get confused somewhere, use AI, and that should help. Cool. Okay. One last thing that I wanted to cover that I don't think I covered, and I probably should have covered this at the start, is actually how do you set up Google Tag Manager, right? So when you create a Google Tag Manager account and you click on this, it gives you the exact code and it tells you where this code needs to be put on the website. Now this is the only place where you actually need developer help, wherein you need to tell your developer, hey, put this first code at the starting of the head tag, and put the second code at the opening of the body tag, and then you can add, once the developer does that, you can actually add your website here. So I'll just show you. So and you can click on test and it'll tell you whether it was successful or not, right? So if there's a tick, it's been successful. Cool, that's it. So I hope this was helpful for everyone out there, and feel free to ask questions if anyone does.